Everybody, it is Mike Young, a digitalnomad.net, and also a plantbaseddiet.org, which you can find at plantbasedvideos.info. This is going on two channels because this guy, Jacob Whelan, I've watched some of his videos before. This is kind of a crossover between both of the channels that I have. He makes some excellent points, and just so you know about him, I think he's retired. I think he's like 40 or early 40s, never been married, or it seems like any kind of significant long-term relationship, worked a career for like 20 years. I think he's in like Alabama, is my guess, somewhere affordable, at least relatively affordable based on how things are. And I think he was sick too. You're going to find out in this video. Let's get right into it.
Things have gotten so crazy and out of hand. I used to think we were living in the Twilight Zone. But now that I've taken some time to really think about this, I'm convinced that we're living in the upside down. Everything.
Okay, upside down, because he is saying that so many things that you think, if people were paying attention and trying to set the world up in a way that allows people to enjoy life, would be the opposite of what they are. And even though him and I you'll see, are not exactly on the same page with the food part, we're so much in alignment here.
Thing is inverted. You think about all the stuff in our daily lives and what we're led to believe versus what is true, it's all backwards. And I've got 8 specific things that I'm going to run by you, and let me know in the comments below if you agree or disagree with these. But these 8 things are things that has impacted my personal life in very profound ways in some cases.
I also want to say about this guy, Jacob, he says that, he's not gotten married or gotten in a long-term relationship because of the way the system is set up and what he has seen other folks that he's known over the years go through, and it's not been pleasant. So he's got a lot of good observations here.
And throughout my entire life, or most of my life, I was led to believe something was true when in fact the truth was the complete opposite. So the first thing, food. Our food system is completely upside down.
Okay, I totally agree with that. The food system is a mess. Just so you know, 90% of all medical costs in the United States, which is one of the highest per capita medical costs in the world, go to non-communicable diseases. That's something that you can't catch from somebody else. It's something that you create through your lifestyle. So that is messed up, especially in a time when, there's a giant gap between the rate of inflation, which is much higher than the rate of wage growth, and the average person can barely afford to live. So we're just throwing all this money away, and it doesn't make any sense.
Because you think about the information they put out to us, and they actually are telling us now that Fruity Pebbles are healthier than ground beef.
Oh.
Who am I to judge, right? All I know is that when I stopped eating that kind of food and I started eating real whole foods and I centered my diet around meat and animal products.
Okay, real whole foods I agree with. Meat and animal products are not whole foods. They are, it's like eating another human, basically. You wouldn't do that.
My health completely transformed because there was a time in my life in the not so distant past where I was very, very sick. I was on the brink of death. And after being failed by the medical industry, I took matters into my own hands.
So he probably was eating tons of processed food, like he says, food-like products. Processed food is basically food that was a whole plant, if you're talking about plants only, and they removed tons of it. They removed the fiber, the water, a lot of the nutrition, and add all kinds of chemicals.
Made that change, and I fixed myself without without pharmaceuticals.
I wonder what he had.
I'm not saying that's going to work for everybody, but it just really highlights the fact that what we're told about food and nutrition.
My guess is he probably had metabolic syndrome or some kind of lifestyle created disease like that, like high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, autoimmune disorders, excess weight, these types of things. And yeah, you can heal that on a carnivore diet, but the problem is you won't ever get to your best self. And when I say heal, I don't mean completely heal. I just mean so it's not out of control. So you don't have to take pharmaceuticals, but you're on a strict regimen and you're still not doing the best you can. So it's only like maybe halfway there as well. I would look at that.
Actually completely false. We should not be eating stuff that is made in a lab. We shouldn't be centering our diet around food products that are made by humans. We should be eating what is natural, what is from the earth, because everything that we need to thrive is all around.
Yeah, and natural, I mean, back in the cave people days, you had to eat animals. There was no way to refrigerate things. It's disgusting, though. You would never do that on your own. Now that we're not in a survival mode, we're in a thrive mode, even though most people are killing themselves and are chronically ill. But I still don't think that anyone would knowingly and willingly go out and do everything it takes to kill an animal and eat it. So I don't think that's food. I don't think your body recognizes that as food unless you're going to die because you can't get plants.
Around us, we don't need anything else. We have these big old brains and we're so sophisticated, yet we overcomplicate things. And we believe that what was put here on Earth somehow isn't good enough, so we have to create our own food. And that ties into the next thing that is completely upside down, and that is
Okay, before he leaves food, he says, whatever we have is not good enough, so we have to create our own food. I would say that my take is that the world's run by large corporations, a lot of which are the food companies. A lot of the big food companies are basically just divisions of the same company, same couple of companies. So, of course, how is the world run by corporations? Well, in the United States, it's through lobbyists. They have all the money. They can influence all the lawmakers and get everything the way they want it. And of course, you already know we have the highest medical cost per capita, and 90% of all medical costs are due to non-communicable diseases. So there's a vested interest in creating things that explode your taste buds, yet don't optimize your health, and they actually cause chronic illness. Doesn't kill you, but it keeps you in a state of chronic illness. Does this make sense? Let me know in the comments. So that's what I think that's going on, and that's why we have this system we have, is because of food chemists, food scientists, anybody that makes these food-like products, aka denatured drugs that explode your taste buds. They make you addicted, and they keep you chronically ill. You never reach your health goals. You never live the life you could, but you become a slave to the government, the corporations, the medical system, et cetera, et cetera.
is the medical industry. And I'm not saying the medical industry doesn't play a part, and it's not a good thing, because it definitely is. It's great for critical illness. If you have a wound,
He's getting into it now. So yeah, emergency medicine, like you got in a car accident. First place I'll go is to the hospital. Take me there. They know what they're doing. But anything that is ongoing and maintenance related, like chronic diseases or lifestyle created, you don't want to go there, because who runs that? The pharmaceutical companies. They make all kinds of money if you're chronically ill. And not just pharmaceutical companies, but just the hospitals themselves. They make money off procedures, surgeries, etc.
wound or an injury, our medical industry is one of the best industries on the planet. But when it comes to sick care and it comes to curing people, we fall short. And
I like how he calls it sick care. It's not health care. It's sick care, like he says, and that's a great description.
the reason for that is because we don't focus on curing the patient. We focus on treating symptoms. We focus on alleviating symptoms.
Yeah, and as I've understood, a patient cured is a customer lost is one way to look at it. But also there is the standard of care. I don't think that Jacob gets into it here, but the standard of care is something that all the medical people have been trained in school, and they have to follow it. Otherwise, they will probably get sued. And guess what? The standard of care is different than optimal care, which you can get if you really demand it, and eventually you'll be healed. But they don't want to do that, and a lot of times they'll refer you to somebody else or say, I don't know about the food, I don't know about this, I don't know about that, etc.
Symptoms, and a lot of that means taking pharmaceuticals. We're one of the only countries in the world that advertises pharmaceuticals on TV.
They let them on there.
And there's a reason for that, because it's very, very profitable. So instead of focusing on the patient and trying to cure people, we focus on stringing that out as long as you possibly can, so that we can make that industry richer. And that's really what all this is about.
So you as a patient, you as an illness, you're basically like an annuity for the medical people that you see on a regular basis. You are an annuity. So they want to keep you alive, but chronically ill.
And that's what all the food issue is about too, is because a lot of these things are very profitable, and it's all about money. And that also ties into the next thing that is completely backwards, and that is the idea that we need to celebrate and be okay with being obese, with
Okay, well, it used to be fat shaming. You still hear that. There's a little bit of that. But now it's the opposite. The Victoria's Secret models, I know it used to be like rail thin, probably anorexic, probably the wrong way, but now they're the other direction. And it's just because I think the companies, the corporations, realize they're making more money when they get culture to embrace this kind of a concept.
Being sedentary and with being sick. We think it's normal now. Actually, we've normalized it. And that's a big problem because when you're overweight, when you're obese, when you're sick, when you're sedentary, when you're all these things, then you're probably not going to be as healthy as somebody who has a healthy body composition.
Yeah, also, sick is like the new normal. So you don't want to be normal. You want to be strange. You want to be weird. You want to be different. I'm 55, for instance, and everybody over 50 is chronically ill, it seems like. So most people don't think I'll look 55, but still, I won't be able to convince somebody, I think, till I'm like 110. See my book, Live to 150, at liveto150.org. You can learn more over there if this interests you.
And that's not to say that people that are overweight or obese or sick are somehow inferior. It just means that we shouldn't celebrate that. We should be focusing on getting people healthy. And
yeah, but the problem is where society is right now, most people want to be like others. They want to be similar. They want to have that camaraderie. And if the average person's overweight, that's going to create all the pressure for everyone to be like that. So you're normal. Because someone like me, I'm not normal. I mean, I'm not chronically ill. I don't have to go to crazy amounts of doctor's appointments, procedures, surgeries, questions because I got to get images. We don't know what's going on. Get you on the pharmaceuticals. They all have negative side effects, all of them. I mean, that's normal, unfortunately.
Creating a healthy lifestyle for themselves, but instead we just say, you know what? It's okay to be overweight. It's okay to be sick. It's okay to be sedentary. You can do whatever you want in life, which is absolutely true. You can, but the problem here is that it ties into all the other stuff I just talked about because there's money in people being sick. There's money in people being overweight. Because when you're sick and overweight, you're more likely to go on medications. You're more likely to need medical care.
Don't call them medications. They're pharmaceuticals. They're drugs. The real medicine is food.
And you're more likely
things that your body recognizes as food, so it will not express non-communicable disease. That's how you know it's food.
To buy a lot more food in some cases. So again, a lot of this comes down to money, but it's completely backwards the way we go about this. And again, that's not to degrade anybody that's unhealthy, overweight, or obese, because there are other factors that can tie into that. It's not always diet and nutrition related, and it's not all.
Okay, he said it's not always diet and nutrition related. Now that I have to disagree on. We do health optimization events. We define that health optimization is a fully balanced state of health that is verified by an absence of non-communicable disease. Anybody can obtain this. It's about balance, and you need to follow the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine and the 6 pillars of healthy vegan food. If you want to know more about this kind of stuff, just go to our website at plantbaseddiet.org and you'll see what I'm talking about. So I do not agree with what he's saying there.
Always related to being sedentary, but instead of ignoring lifestyle and diet, that should be the main focus. Yes. But it's not. Instead, we just blow it off and say, it's okay. Don't make any changes, but here's a pill or here's an injection. Here's something you can.
Plus, the system only gives the doctors a few minutes with these patients. They're never going to be able to teach them everything they need to know, which is why you have health coaches, why you have health optimization events like we do, so you can get around people that want to do better. That's what you need. You need camaraderie. You need positive influences. You become like the people you hang around with.
Can take that's a shortcut that's going to cost you money, by the way, and you can never get away from it, because if you do, you're going to revert back to exactly the way you were before, but just take this thing instead of changing something about your life. And another thing that is completely backwards is relationships. All the stuff that is shoved in our face every single day, the stuff you see on social media, the mainstream media, TV, entertainment in general, it makes us believe that we all have to be surrounded with people our entire lives. And if we're not, then there's something wrong with us.
Okay, well, I'm an introvert, and maybe this guy Jacob is also an introvert, and that's an interesting point he brings up. It sounded to me like he was going to say, well, you're going to get jealous and depressed because you see everybody living their fake lives or the massaged and, social media up lives, which is, it's so much of social media. A lot of people do get depressed because of that.
And it also makes us believe that the hookup culture is a good thing and that we should all be cheating on our spouses, and infidelity is healthy and natural, and divorces are okay and we should celebrate those and have divorce parties, and all these weird things that shouldn't really be happening. All that stuff is upside down.
Well, I don't know if it's upside down. I think people should report truthfully. If they're going to go on somewhere and broadcast their life, it should be truthful. Yeah, I mean, people can always decide what they want. If they feel like getting into a relationship, getting married, and going through a divorce is all normal, well, I don't think so. I mean, maybe it's normalized because it happens a lot, but I don't think people want that. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, because instead of focusing on hooking up with as many people as you possibly can and
No,
having
some people want
strings
that.
of meaningless relationships and, getting married before you're ready just because somebody says you should and having kids even though you don't believe you should. And
Now, when he says the hookup culture, what I see out there is a lot of people basically saying, "Hey, I'm not going to settle. This is what I want." And unfortunately, what I see is it's mostly on the female side nowadays. And I think that there's a lot of reasons for that. I think that a lot of women have been repressed over recent generations and now have this freedom that hasn't been there. But there's plenty of guys that do it too. So it's not just one or the other. Although I'd say that the guys, the dynamic we're in now is that the guys kind of want to get married and so do the women, but there's so many problems out there that he's pointing out that I don't think anybody wants to take these kind of risks that they have taken in the past, which is a good thing because if you do get into a relationship or a marriage, you'll be a lot more careful. But the other part of this is that a lot of people will never get married and will never have kids because of this.
getting a divorce because things don't work out and you're just ready to throw in the towel, or maybe something better came along so you're ready to trade up. Instead of doing all that stuff, we should be focusing on building meaningful relationships with the right people. We should be focusing on attracting the right people.
I think some people are. I think this guy is too. I think he realizes he's got a good following. And by the way, the link to his video is down below in the description. But, let's just see what the rest of it. We're not even halfway through this one yet.
But the problem here is that we can't do that because when you're constantly surrounded with people, because we're led to believe we have to be, or else,
Okay.
again, there's something wrong with us,
Here's where
then
he's
there's a
going.
pretty good chance that you're attracting the wrong kind of people in your life just because you feel like you have to have someone in your life at all times. And
Okay, so he's saying you're going to get someone, you're going to get whoever's around, even if it's not the best person for you, just because you have to have someone as opposed to no one. Maybe he's seen a lot of his friends do that. I mean, I haven't fallen into that trap, and I'm sure some people do, but I wouldn't necessarily think that that's the way it is. I think that if anything, people are more alone than ever these days. That's my thought. I don't necessarily agree with this one.
that can be a very easy way to fall into toxic relationships. And toxic relationships are eventually going to go sour, which will eventually lead to divorce. And oh, by the way, divorce is another thing
Sure,
that's
seen
completely
that.
upside down.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
when you get divorced now, instead of focusing on the family unit and allowing both parents to have joint custody of the children,
Yeah, I was going to say the big problem with marriage is not. It's a disappointment when it ends for all people, but the real problem is with custody of children that you have during the marriage. That is for sure. That's a major problem because the guy almost always loses big time. Anything kind of financial things, you can leave it up to the state if you want, or get a prenup, which is better because you direct that. So that's not really an issue. But the custody thing is, we are a long way, in my opinion, from balancing that one out, and it needs to be balanced.
it's usually skewed one way or the other. And in a lot of
Yeah.
cases, and I would say most cases, it's
Yeah,
skewed
almost
in
all-
favor of the
all.
woman, where
Yeah.
the woman usually gets custody. And the dad usually becomes a 15% father.
Yeah, he says 15% father. I've gone through this, so I can vouch that I was someone who saw my son, who was younger at the time, more than half the time. I mean, if not all the time, he was not in school. I was there, except for a day or two here where I'd have to go away to work. But that wasn't most of the week. Most of the week I was with him. And then now back to a 15% dad, because then he's not near me. He's somewhere else. He's going to school out of the area. I can only, of course, even have the chance to see him when he's not in school. And that's only on days when where the custody exchange could take place. And yeah, it's a giant mess. I mean, I can tell you, there was never a time during the negotiation of that where it was mandated, or anyone tried to mandate, that I would get at least 50% of the free time. And the problem as I found out, is that can change. Even if it's agreed upon and signed, something can come up and it can change. And all because, as Jacob's pointing out here, there really isn't a universal law or way of handling it that gives both parents an equal opportunity to raise their child.
He gets the kids on the weekends. And to me, that's completely backwards, because to maintain a healthy relationship with your children, if there is a divorce, custody should be split 50-50.
Yeah, and also it's usually when there's a problem with kids' behavior and kids who are adults' behavior, it's typically traced back to not a real relationship there with the father. So when you take away the opportunity for a real relationship, not saying it's going to happen, then you've automatically predestined that child to having issues and almost all the issues are based on not having a good relationship with the father. So there you go.
That way, the kids have a father figure in their lives, because we have seen the detrimental impacts of children not having a strong father figure in their lives, and it is not good. So instead of doing what we're doing now and giving custody to one parent or the other, we should make it more equal. And not only that, but we should be striving to create a culture that does not celebrate these things. Again, this whole thing is completely backwards, and it's
the celebrating thing. If I go back to I got separated in 2009, divorce was finalized in 2010. It was the early days of social media. There was a giant wave of divorces because everyone said, "Oh, it's meant to be. I've reunited with my high school sweetheart," and there was a lot of that. But the problem is, even from that time and before, and even up to now, I find that most people that get divorced, they blame the divorce on their partner. They that's all I have to say about that. I can go on and on, but I don't believe I've done that. I've learned so much. There was so much I had to learn, and I have learned. But there's so many people that place near exclusive blame on everything on their former partner. And those people usually will go into another relationship thinking they've got it right, because that bad person is gone now from the previous marriage. And rarely, if ever, is that the case. In fact, usually it means they didn't learn the lesson that they needed to learn, which is why that marriage broke up in the first place.
It's upside down, and I do feel like that is having a very negative impact on the family unit and on relationships and people in general. So at some point, we have to ask ourselves.
Yeah, so of course, this is why people aren't entering into marriages anymore. This is why the fertility rate has dropped to an unbelievably low, below replacement rates. This is why a lot of guys in their 20s have exited the dating market. Everyone has seen this play out over a few generations, and they don't want to do it.
Why does everything seem to be geared against the family unit? I think we can all speculate, but I think deep down, we kind of know the answer. And that brings me to the next thing that is completely upside down, and that is all of this division that is being sown.
Yeah, there you go. You see, the thing is, if everyone is constantly pointing the finger and blaming, like you blame your ex, they were the problem in the marriage, not me, it's them. They're the real problem, okay? That's what I'm talking about when I say blame, all right? Very few people look at divorce as a gift where they don't have to be around that person anymore, okay? Although I've definitely said that. That has definitely been the case for me, because I've learned a ton that I would never have learned anyway else, and I've continued to grow, and I've grown in a way that I never would have been able to grow with my previous spouse. So that's a good thing. But then the division, of course, is not only in relationships, the war of the sexes, the political wars. When everybody thinks they're right and they're blaming and pointing the finger, you forget that this is why the large corporations run the world, and everything's a mess. Everything's upside down. Everyone's chronically ill. This all makes sense. And by the way, this guy is he's retired. He's financially secure. Most people are not. Most people are living paycheck to paycheck and can barely make ends meet these days.
Into our daily lives. That should not be happening. When you think about a thriving civilization and a strong civilization, the last thing that's probably on your mind is the fact that everybody in that civilization is completely divided. But that's kind of where we're at right now, because we are divided over everything. Race, religion, politics, sex, food, I mean, you name it. If there's something we can be divided on and something we can disagree on.
And most people who are so passionate that everyone thinks they're right. They can't even see that it is this division that's the problem. And I still, there have to be a lot of work once everyone realizes that it is a division that's the problem. But it's one of the reasons why I'd say, again, the fertility rate's dropping, less people are getting married. It's just turning into a nightmare.
We're divided on it. And a lot of that stems from external factors. Again, there's this weird narrative that's being sown into our daily lives that pits us against our fellow man. And that's a very bad thing because, again, when you think about a strong civilization, that's the last thing you think. And that is exactly what's happening. We are no longer strong. We're not as strong as we used to be because unity is where it's at. Unity is where we thrive. And when we are united, we are the strongest that we can possibly be.
Yeah, can you remember a time before the internet? I mean, the 1990s was like the last decade before the internet really set in, and everything was different. But again, I'm differing with Jacob because back in the 90s and before, and I'm an introvert, you had to be social with people. You had to connect in person, et cetera, et cetera. It was nearly impossible to live without constant human contact, which was exhausting for somebody that's an introvert. But now you can be alone. And there's a loneliness epidemic, so don't forget about that part of all this.
But when we're divided, that's probably when we're going to fall. And if you think about civilizations throughout history, one of the primary ways that those civilizations fell, and one of the easiest ways that caused that, is that they were very divided. Something was injected into that civilization, whether it be an idea, a belief, typically it was religion. But when these ideas become so different and no one can agree on anything, that's when everything kind of falls apart. And this is another big question that we have to ask ourselves is why is all this division being sown into our daily lives? And another big question that we have to ask ourselves is why are we letting it? And something else that's completely upside down and backwards is this belief that all this materialistic crap is somehow going to make us happy. We now live in this consumerism society, and it's all...
I think it's always been like this here in the United States. It's part of the American dream, if you ask me, the American nightmare.
All about having more. It's all about needing more. All of us need the next, newest, nicest thing. We have to trade up. We have to have the biggest house, the newest car, the nicest car, the new cell phone, the new technology, the new fill in the blank. That's what most of our society is geared around.
And that's all consumerism because you want all these nice things just so you can have them. Now, someone like myself is more into producing, so I need to have certain things in order to be able to effectively produce new things, either content or events or whatever we're doing. And that's different, though. I'm not the average person, that's for sure.
And to me, that is completely backwards. Because if you look at some of the most successful people in the country, those people are often the most miserable. And it is because they spend their entire lives working to get all of the money and all of the things that they've wanted their entire lives, thinking that those things are the things that are going to make them happy. They think that those things are going to be the things that fulfill them until they get those things. And then they realize it didn't do anything to make them happy. As a matter of fact, the void that they had in their heart and in their soul is now much bigger because, again, they did spend their entire life working for these things that they thought was going to make them happy, and it didn't, and now they're completely lost. They have no sense of direction. And they're wondering now, what is my purpose? What am I actually striving towards?
Right. Part of what we talk about with lifestyle medicine and the 6 pillars of healthy vegan food, which is living in a way that is fun, enjoyable, you're not chronically ill, is just having good habits. And in my book, Live to 150, I talk about your life purpose. You definitely need to have one, and that's up to you to figure that out.
It can leave you very, very confused. And I'm actually somebody who went through that very thing because I worked almost 20 years of my life. And for the first, I would say 10 years of that, I was focused on materialistic stuff. I was focused on the hookup culture and trading up and doing all these things that I thought was going to make me happy. And then I got all these things, and I pretty much now have everything in my life materialistic that I could ever possibly want. And I realized that none of that stuff actually matters. And what actually did matter is the stuff that you can't put a dollar amount on. It's the experiences.
I mean, yeah, experiences are good. And the stuff is you just need enough. It's like your income. You need just enough to make ends meet and to get the basics. Anything beyond the basics, the rate of return of satisfaction is just goes down. Maybe it goes up a little bit, but the amount of value you're getting for that time and that money and that energy, and of course just having things, you have to maintain them, it's just not worth it.
It was traveling the world, seeing different places, experiencing different cultures, trying different foods, meeting people, building meaningful relationships, exploring the natural beauty of the world. Those are the things that ended up mattering to me. And I believe that those are the things that should matter to most people, because if you think about our entire existence, those are the things that mattered. We never had access to all this stimulation and all this materialistic stuff throughout all of history.
Yeah, I know that Denise and I, we do a lot of walking because part of one of the lifestyle medicine pillars is physical activity. All right. So we want to get 12,000 steps a day, aerobic exercise. And sometimes the weather's bad, it's cold or it's rainy. We go into a mall. And one of the malls we go into, I have to go through this Bolero. It's like a fancy bowling alley with all kinds of video games and loud music. There's so much stimulation. The constant, all these different cacophony of noises from all the different video games and pinball machines is blasting. They have them all turned up for some reason. And then the music thumping, like there's a DJ there or something, and then people bowling and laughing. And it is just so much overstimulation. I guess this is what people want and like these days, but I don't get it.
But now we've been thrown into this new world, and that's what everything's about, and we can't align with it. And I think that's why a lot of people feel lost and hopeless, and they can't seem to find their sense of purpose. And another major thing that is completely upside down is the lack of financial education.
Oh, there you go.
And I would say practical knowledge, practical.
Yeah, that should be taught in school. When I say taught in school, I mean there should be a mandatory class at every grade level that's ongoing, because it's one of the most important things. And yeah, it's just a nightmare out there. It's an absolute nightmare for basic financial education.
Skills, life skills, those kinds of things. Throughout school, I was never taught any of that stuff. And for the most part, I don't think hardly anybody is. I mean, think back on your life. Did you get proper financial education?
Unless your parents were teaching you on a regular basis, which is good, but most have not done that.
Did you get education about investing and building actual skills that you would need later in life? And I'm somebody who graduated high school, and then I went on to get a college degree, and then I went on later again to get another college degree. And through all of my training, all of my education, never once was I taught any of this stuff. I was never taught about how to budget, how to invest.
It's like doctors and medical professionals. How many hours of nutrition do they have? Of lifestyle medicine habits, the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine, 6 pillars of healthy vegan food. They don't know any of that stuff. You'd think they would, right? Just like you'd think your basic K through 12 school would be talking about how to manage money, but they don't.
How to set yourself up to be successful in life. I was never taught about business. I was never taught about practical skills to survive, how to rent, how to get an apartment, how to buy a house, how to buy a car, things to look for, none of that stuff. Yeah. If you're going to get that kind of education, it has to come from the parents. And the way society is set up now, things are very expensive, so now both parents have to work. So the chances of a kid getting that kind of education is going to be pretty slim because the parents simply aren't around.
But you have this digital device that you're probably watching this on right now. You could use it as a producer, and you could produce knowledge in your own brain that has to do with this, as long as you are intentional with the type of content you're watching. And if you're watching this, maybe you are, or listening to, even if it's just playing in the background. I never had that opportunity. I used to have to go research this stuff at libraries and paper books and get them, sent over to the branch where I was. So things are so much easier. The problem is that's not what the average person does. The average person just wastes a dramatic, enormous amount of time on like social media, game playing, and just mindless things.
Around enough to teach the kid those practical, fundamental life skills. And again, let me know down in the comments below if you received any of that kind of formal education through the public education system or even the private education system. I would say that in most cases you probably didn't. And if you did get that kind of education, it probably came from your parents. So again, this is another major question we have to ask ourselves. Why aren't we taught these fundamental life skills? And again, we can only speculate, but it kind of seems to be by design. So with all that said, what can we do about all this?
All right, when he says by design, do you think he's a conspiracy theorist? Do you think he's a prepper? Let me know in the comments.
Now that we know that everything's upside down and the opposite is actually true about most of the things that we've been told.
Sounds like there's a big truck backing up on his street.
In life, what do we do? And I think the answer to that is exactly what we're doing right now. If you're watching this video, you're aware of these problems. And the first step to solving a problem is being aware that there's a problem. And in our daily lives, we're faced with a lot of problems. But the great thing about that is that we also hold the power to overcome these problems. And in this case in particular, for every single one of the things we just talked
about. I like this guy. One of the reasons is because he's very observant. He obviously hasn't gotten himself into a situation he has to work the whole rest of his life to get out of, which a lot of people have, or been scarred emotionally from some form of abuse or claimed abuse. Let's put it that way. He's very optimistic. I'm sure he's had all kinds of abuse against him. All right. Let's just be realistic. And he's been able to work himself out of it. He's been able to see through the smoke and mirrors. And he has an optimistic outlook like I do. I'd say I'm an optimist, but you have to put in the work. And he's put in the work, whereas the average person is just totally distracted. They can't focus on anything, and they're just unable to do it. It's mind-boggling to me, but I'm so glad to see others like this guy, Jacob, who's doing it the right way.
Talked about overcoming these problems is as simple as doing the opposite of what we're led to believe. Doing the opposite of what we're told. Yeah. Because obviously, if what we're being told is backwards and upside down, and the opposite is true, then if we feel like we're in a bad position right now, and we've been doing all the things.
Now, don't just do the opposite for the sake of doing the opposite. There may be some things, in fact, many things, that what he's saying and what I'm saying does not apply to. But it's an optimist's viewpoint that he can say it's that simple. Just do the opposite. So I like that line of thinking.
Things that we're led to believe is true, then it makes sense that that is not the right path to follow. And it also makes sense that if we do the opposite, the outcome might be a little bit better. So maybe that's all it takes. And for me, that is exactly what it's taken. I'm somebody who has forged my own path, and I've kind of done the opposite of a lot of the things that we...
And by the way, I've done the same thing because I've always been my own boss. I think there's been a period of maybe a month where I worked for somebody else, but that's about it. It was a summer job too I had in the summer, which I also was doing my own thing on the side. And this is back in the 80s when there was no work from home, there was no internet, there was no cell phones, everything was on a tape recorded voicemail, but I still managed to do it. So it is possible regardless of the situation. And there's never been more opportunity for the average person and everyone who has one of those devices, which I don't know where my phones are. Oh, here it is. Everybody has these things, so just use them in a way that's productive. That's all you have to do.
We've been told, and it took me years and decades to get to this point, but once it got to that point and the veil had been lifted from my eyes and I could see things for what they really were, the moment I started going against the grain and forging my own path and doing the opposite of what we're told is the moment my life changed forever.
It changed forever, but I wonder if he got pushed back.
Instead of working until I was 65, I retired at 39. Could I have worked until I was 65? Absolutely. Would I have had a lot more money had I have done that? Absolutely. But I also witnessed people all around me that were working until they were 65. And then they would get out and they realized that they were too old to do the things in life that they wanted to do. And one of the biggest regrets that they had is that they didn't get out sooner. At a certain point in my life,
and it doesn't have to be one extreme or the other. You can scale your work back. You can go part-time. You can work half-time. You can work for yourself and make your own hours. You don't have to totally retire in the sense of traditional retirement. In fact, in my book, I talk about, I don't think it's a good idea, especially for men, because usually they get into a downward spiral and have no purpose. But this guy seems a little different, so I'm happy to see that.
I also stopped subscribing to the idea that we need all this materialistic crap, and I stopped buying stuff. And that allowed me to save a lot more money. And instead of blowing my money on a bunch of materialistic stuff...
I'd say when I got separated and ultimately divorced in 2009, 2010, that was the point for me to start letting go of everything. I had already achieved so many things and got so many things. The only thing I buy is what's really necessary with a few splurges here and there. But it's so much more lightweight and freeing when you can, live like that, I think.
And constantly trading up and needing more. I did the opposite of that. I saved as much money as I possibly could, and I drove beater cars, and I lived a kind of minimalist lifestyle. I was very frugal, and that alone allowed me to be able to retire at the age of 39 without having ever invested. And I didn't invest because I was never given...
Yeah, that's interesting. He never invested.
That type
Interesting that but he made it work anyway. I think he lives in Alabama. Like I said, I think he lives in a relatively reasonable cost area, at least compared to historically, it's been reasonably cost area. And what was it?
Financial education. But now later in life, I'm now doing the opposite of that. And I'm starting to invest. And I'm starting to see the massive earning potential that investing can actually have. And I will say with 100% certainty that investing is one of those things that I should have done a long time ago when I
Yeah, I would say the same thing because it compounds your money, but you have to be disciplined. And most of it is not head knowledge. Most of us already know what to do. It's actually forcing us to do it. And like Jacob's been able to do, he's been able to force himself into a way that where he goes against the programming of society. That's why he's been able to accomplish what he's been able to accomplish. So I think it's a great example for people to follow.
first started my career. But now that I'm doing it now, it is changing my life. And something else that completely transformed my life that I mentioned at the beginning was undoing all the ideologies and all the deeply held beliefs that I had about food, diet, and nutrition. Because like I mentioned before, the moment I did that was the moment my health transformed. And
okay, keep in mind, what he's describing is that he is open-minded. That's all that's required. We say this in all the work that we do. The problem is finding open-minded people is nearly impossible. Everybody says they're open-minded and says they're not closed-minded, but if somebody asks you, hey, you need to change everything about the way you're eating because you're chronically ill, and if you do that, you'll probably be free of all illnesses. Even the average person would be like, no thanks, So you can only imagine the amount of work. I know, because we approach people all the time who are closed-minded, and I don't bother wasting my time with people like that.
that right there was the moment in time where my life transformed forever. And that is actually what started me down this path. And that's what lifted the veil from my eyes about all these other things. Because by having those types of deeply held beliefs, I had blinders on, and it kept me from seeing the truth. But the moment I stepped outside of that, and I was willing to allow myself to be uncomfortable, that's
the uncomfortable, keeping them from seeing the truth. Sounds like the Matrix in a way, okay? But yeah, comfort's a big thing. Most people want to be comfortable. They want to be just like everybody else. So the chance of them adopting this whole new way of looking at things, kind of like he says, is pretty slim, unfortunately. But it's great to see people doing it. That's what I like to see. That's why I am commenting on this video, because I really like seeing other people that are doing it.
It's the moment that everything changed. And really what this all boils down to is realizing that we all have a choice. We all hold the power to shape our reality into whatever we want to make it. We just have to remember to maintain a positive outlook and be grateful.
Yeah, be grateful, maintain a positive outlook, be an optimist. Another thing that he doesn't touch on here that I want to mention is that, look, he's 40 or early 40s right now. He still has many years of fertility left in him, probably decades. Whereas the average woman may not be able to conceive anymore who's his age. He's watched that whole thing. He's watched the whole thing kind of go through and run its course. And this is what we're seeing. I think we're going to see more of this, is guys who are more, I guess, conservative. I'd say that's what he is in his viewpoints, right? Let me know in the comments if I'm right or wrong about that. Guys who are more conservative, they'll take their time, they'll build what they're going to build, or do what they're going to do. And when they ultimately do get with someone, which I believe this person will, it will be significantly younger, like 10, 20 or so years younger, because that's when women are most fertile, they're most able to produce children that don't have all kinds of genetic problems and other lifelong problems that nobody wants to have to deal with. So it'll be interesting to see what he does with his future. He's got a long positive future ahead of him, I believe.
Be grateful that you're not one of the people that has blinders on. You're not one of the people that has your head buried in the sand. You are one of the few that sees the truth. And that alone is something to be grateful for. Because that one simple fact is going to put you so much further ahead of everybody else. So now all you have to do is take action. And of all the things that we talked about, that is the most fundamental and important step of all. And that is one of the things that few people are willing to do, because when
you have to step outside, like you said, out of your comfort zone and start working on something with a tremendous amount of uncertainty. And Anybody can do this. I'm an optimist. Anybody can. Anybody should. When the truth is described to them, they should just do it, or they should get help. Say, okay, well, help me do this. But the average person doesn't do that. It's kind of like the old American spirit, the American ways. You're just going to dig your heels in, and you're not going to let anybody tell you what to do. And that is a toxic behavior, if you ask me, the real toxic, because people say it's men. It's not. It's closed-mindedness. I'd say closed-mindedness is the real toxic behavior, and that goes across all genders. And again, I'm glad to see that Jacob's not that way.
Take action. That means you're changing your life. And sometimes we have formed this identity around the things that we believe. Sometimes we form our identity around these ideologies.
Oh, yeah, he's exactly right. That's who I am. Don't tell me to do anything different. That may be good for you, but it's not me. It's not who I am. Well, that is just made up fairy tale, okay? Because you are whatever you do every day, and you can totally change your life from one day to the next. And we don't live in the past. Also, saying that's who I am is kind of living in the past and saying I'm anchored to what I've done previously. That's going to create depression. So I also think that's not a good way to do it.
And if we disrupt that, then we're essentially disrupting our identity. And that can make us very uncomfortable because sometimes...
Oh my gosh. Also, that brings up another concept called the tomb of personality, if you've ever heard of that. Many people, if not most people, and again, it's a choice, but people choose it, are entombed by what they consider to be their personality. It's almost like you've buried them. They buried themselves. So they've cut off their future. They've limited their future because of who they believe themselves to be, and that they can't get out of that. And that's also a toxic, very bad, closed-minded behavior pattern.
Sometimes that means changing who we are. It means changing ourselves as a person. And that can be kind of scary. But it's only scary because we're afraid of the unknown. We're afraid of what comes next.
Okay, well, let's leave it right here. And I'm going to, again, link his video down below. Let me know your comments down below. This was a great one, I think. This was one that sums up almost all the videos I've ever seen from him. And it kind of, from someone who's not even, this guy's obviously not even plant-based. He's right in line with us. He's not quite got the diet dialed in, but he is so far ahead of the average person that I would love to connect. Jacob, if you're out there, reach out to me. I'd love to connect and learn more about what you do. Just have a conversation. It would be great. And I'd love to hear about your experiences too. If you agree with what he says, if you agree with what I say, just let me know down in the comments. And of course, subscribe. We'll see you in the next video.